Hello again. Now, for some time I've been wanting to do a video or videos on the subject of depression, and I've been asked about this, and what I can say is that I have made a number of attempts to do videos on this because it's a very difficult and very broad subject to cover, and the attempts I have made I wasn't really happy with, so I didn't post them because I didn't think I was doing justice to the subject. Now, the one thing I wanted to avoid at all costs was to in any way kind of trivialise it or make it not sound as serious as it is. So I wanted to try and find the right approach to doing the video on depression. So what I've decided to do is to kind of look at it from two directions, look at it in two ways. Because in my experience, certainly, depression has come about in two distinct ways. The first type of depression, which is pretty common and is almost inevitable when you think about how it arises, is the kind of depression that comes with anxiety, specifically with prolonged anxiety. And the other type of depression that I've certainly experienced is depression that comes, it's not directly related to anxiety, but it comes about through specific life circumstances, through a situation in your life that in many ways it won't change, or it doesn't seem to want to change. It just, you're stuck, you're trapped in a situation. So I'll cover that separately, but for the purposes of this video I want to talk about depression and anxiety. Now, depression comes about in a number of different ways. There's different parts to this. First off, if you're suffering intense anxiety, you're suffering sensitized anxiety, then that alone takes a considerable amount of energy to express all these intense feelings. So you're forever kind of thrashing yourself with this fear, which is draining your body and tiring your body. And the other effect of anxiety like this is to tire you emotionally. You can think of it in terms of your emotions being sort of like a battery, if you like. If you keep on subjecting yourself to all this fear, it's draining your emotional battery, and it keeps on draining it. And the effect is that basically all you're left with feeling is just fear. There always seems to be enough emotional energy for that. But as far as any other feelings are concerned, they can be almost totally absent. So instead of feeling anything here, in your sort of solar plexus region in your stomach, that's where you feel things, you kind of have this dead, numb, frozen, horrible kind of empty feeling there. There's nothing, you don't feel anything, basically. It's basically, like I said, it's because you've drained yourself so much, and when you can't feel anything other than fear, you wonder what your true feelings are. And this is especially true if you're thinking about those close to you, and you're in a situation where you can't feel anything for them, and you wonder what you actually do feel. What's the truth here? But this dead, empty feeling is not representative of how you truly feel. It's just an expression of your physical exhaustion, basically. And that's emotional fatigue. That's what Claire Weeks used to call it. And there's the other one, which is mental fatigue. Now, if you've spent a long time in this state and you haven't found anything to help you, and you're still in it, and you're still questioning it, still trying to figure out what to do, then, as you know, your mind just goes around and around over the same thing, asking the same questions and getting no answers. And it's like a recording in your mind. It just keeps repeating, and it tires you out. It tires your mind out. So if it comes to regular thought, if you put it like that, regular thought seems almost beyond you sometimes, because you can't think of anything else. There's just this fear problem that goes around your head. So those things obviously contribute towards a state of exhaustion, physical depletion. That's what Claire Wicks used to call it. She used to call it depletion rather than depression, because she said that depletion implies that you can recover from it, in that if you deplete, then you replete. You can replete your body. She said that's a much more hopeful word, look at it like that. So there's emotional fatigue, mental fatigue, there's the physical exhaustion from the expression of too much intense fear. Now, added to this, there's the fact that if you're in this state, it's kind of similar to anxiety in that it's a cycle. So that the more depressed you are, the more depressed you can become, because you're trying so hard to get out of this state. And added to that, of course, is if you're not sleeping properly, you're not sleeping hardly at all, again, it's draining you physically. If you're not eating properly, again, your body needs proper sustenance to start to recover. And all these things combine to produce this state. And I've no doubt you're well aware of all the symptoms of depression, and certainly in my experience, that most of it is just apathy. You just couldn't care less. You don't want to know. All the things that you used to have an interest in, or the things that you used to enjoy doing, all that you just feel like you don't care about it anymore, or you care about it very little. And when you try and engage yourself in any of these things, you just can't motivate yourself enough to do them. And it's kind of it's like I said, it's like a vicious circle, because the less you do, the less you want to do, and this process just can go on, and that's the main thing. It's the apathy, it's the indifference to everything, and as well as that, there's, like I said, about not wanting to eat much, not eating properly. You don't feel like you want to eat. You can. Even though you're exhausted, sometimes you can't even sleep, because your mind is just whirring away there and you can't shut it up. And this sadness, there's such a profound feeling of sadness. That's what I always think of. And tears, you cry, the slightest thing can make you cry. Or you could just cry for no reason. You just feel like crying, it just keeps coming over you. It's also the feeling that you don't want to get involved in anything. So you might hide yourself away from people as much as you can, because interacting with people in any way, even those close to you, is so difficult, because you just can't bring yourself to sort of hold a conversation almost. You'd rather hold yourself in and not have to make the effort to talk to people. So even if you're not physically removed, you kind of are closed off inside. You don't want to participate in things, you just don't want to know. And before I go any further, obviously, if you've reached a point where the sort of indifference and apathy is total, then you do need help. You need some form of practical help, and sometimes people can get to that state and not even appreciate just how low they've gone. And in my own case, I had enough awareness of my mood to be able to do something about it, but it's not always the case with people. So if someone close to you is acting like this, is closed off, is quiet, far too quiet, all the things I've talked about, then you need to get them to get some help, because people should not go on like this, suffering on their own. They need some sort of support. And for those who are close to someone suffering in this way, it can be so hard to get through to them. So hard to get to help lift them out of this. It can be just as upsetting for the person who's with the sufferer rather than the sufferer themselves. But like I say, you've got, if you're really, really bad, you have to get some sort of help. Now, these days there are any number of medications you can have for depression, and they don't suit everybody. They don't work for people, or the effects of them are just too drastic for the person to take them. Speaking for myself, I have used antidepressants a lot over the years, and they have helped me considerably. But the thing I always say about antidepressants, if it comes to the time you feel if you're taking them and you want to stop taking them, when you decide to do that, do it extremely slowly, very, very slowly. Some people, when they're taking these and they want to stop, they try and stop taking them too quickly. You have to take it very, very gently. Believe me, I've had to do this in the past, and I remember how it left me feeling. So that's just one word to the wise: don't ever rush taking. Don't ever rush stopping taking antidepressants. And of course, the other thing about them is that when you first start taking them, the effects can. Well, they can't actually. There won't be any effects immediately for quite some time. They can take a matter of weeks, sometimes even longer, because the way they work, they have to kind of build up in your body to a certain level, and that's when they start to affect your mood. So in the beginning, many people feel worse before they start to feel better, and I've certainly known what that feels like. So anyway, that's medication. And as to which one to take, well, I've stuck with the SSRI type in my life. Those are the ones that have always worked for me, but everybody's different. So you're in this state, and if you're still suffering from anxiety as well, which you most likely are, you've suffered for so long and suffered so deeply that you end up in this depleted, exhausted state. So what on earth are you supposed to do about it? Well, I can tell you how it's been for me, and how the first time I was stuck in an anxiety cycle, and how I explained on one of my other videos how I got out of it. I can describe to you what it felt like for me and what I did, how things changed for me. And the thing I want to emphasize here is that, quite apart from any medication, you're basically doing the same with depression as you do with anxiety. You're allowing things to change. Your body wants to recover from depression. It's not a natural state for it to be in. And if you stop interfering and thrashing it so much with fear and questioning and all the rest of it, once you give your body that chance, it does start to recover by itself. And this is the thing people don't really understand. They think there has to be something sort of proactive they need to do to bring about recovery. Well, obviously, if you find yourself, if there's things you want to do, if there's things you want to occupy your mind with, even whatever they are, then do it by all means. Whatever you do, don't sit around and wallow in it. Whatever physical effort or anything like that you make, it's all going to help, because during those times, that's when your body can start to recover. But sitting around and feeling sorry for yourself is all too easy, and I'm a fine one to talk, because I've done plenty of that in my time, plenty of it. And there were many, many days where it was all I could do just to get out of bed, and then spend the day just sat in the chair with the television on, probably most of the time not even watching what was on it, just kind of glazed over, just totally indifferent and apathetic. That's nowhere to live, believe me. So, like I said, going back to the very first time this happened to me, where I spent months in this increasingly intense state of anxiety, and by the end of it, I was totally drained. I mean, I was only 18 years old, but I felt like I'd been pushed into old age. I felt totally exhausted. And I talked about this on my other video, but I want to just briefly describe what happened at that lowest point, because it was a very, very strange experience. I had spent weeks and weeks questioning everything, trying to figure out what to do, trying to get myself out of this state which I didn't even understand. And at one point, with all the symptoms I was getting, I had this feeling that I couldn't breathe. In fact, in my exhausted state, I concluded that unless I made myself breathe, unless I consciously made myself breathe, that somehow my breathing would stop, which was total nonsense, of course. However, this is what the idea I was stuck with. And it got really bad one night, and I stayed up all night, and I was in a terrible state. And by the end of the night, I was just more and more exhausted. Just, the fear had totally. This was kind of the peak of the fear. It had just totally drained me. And I described in my other video how I went outside early in the morning, and I just walked around our garden for a couple of hours, just walking around aimlessly. And I was just so tired, I couldn't even think really anymore. I was just walking, and I didn't really understand why I did it. But at the end of it, when I was finally coaxed back indoors by my mum, I'd reached a point of defeat. I was totally defeated. Whatever this that was happening to me was, it had beaten me. I was totally defeated. And with this idea in my head about breathing, I figure that, exhaustion is going to catch up with me. I won't be able to keep myself awake. And if I fall asleep, then my breathing will stop, which again is total rubbish. It couldn't happen. But this is the way I've thought. And finally I caved in, and I crawled into bed, and I closed my eyes, and I really, honestly didn't expect to ever open them again. However, 2 hours later, after intense sleep, dreamless sleep, I woke up, and as I came to, I noticed that first of all, my breathing was working just fine. It was normal and regular breathing. But the other thing was, I felt very, very peaceful, very peaceful. And I kind of sat up in bed and looked around, and suddenly everything was changed. Everything felt different. I can't describe it much better than that, but there it seemed at last to have been, seemed to be interest in doing something again. And I never felt quite like that in my entire life, and I didn't really understand what was going on, because I've been in fear and terror for so long, and then suddenly there I was, feeling as calm as anything. But it was extraordinary experience, and in the days and weeks that followed, what happened on that morning stuck in my mind, and it seemed to be an assurance of some kind that everything was going to be all right. I'd gone to sleep on that occasion quite prepared to die, because I thought that was the inevitable thing that had to happen. However stupid that thought was, it was in my mind, and I believed it. And when that didn't happen, it felt like I'd been given a reprieve of some kind. And after that, I realized that quite by accident, I had discovered the basis of Claire Weeks' teaching. I'd surrendered to the fear. I'd surrendered to everything. The fight had gone. The conflict was ended. I couldn't do it anymore. I just gave up. And gradually, over the coming weeks after that, I started to gradually take an interest in things again. The thought of that that particular occasion kept on recurring in my mind. I kept remembering it and pondering on it and thinking, trying to understand what it meant. But I did understand that it was the conflict that was keeping me in this state. It was all this fighting. Like I said, I discovered Claire Weekes' method before I even knew anything about it. And it took me perhaps 6 to 8 weeks where gradually I sort of came back to life again. I started to do things again. I started to feel like I wanted to eat again. I started to sleep better because there was not nearly so much of this trying to work it all out in my brain, which used to keep me awake for so much of the time. And at the end of that time, I felt almost back to normal. I'm not saying during that time I didn't get afraid ever, because I did. I certainly did. But somehow it was different, because I was able to be prepared to let myself be afraid and not be so concerned in trying to stop it as I had been. But I think I'm trying to show here that the process just happened by itself. I gave up the fight because I thought I had no choice. That's all I could do. And once I'd done that, this surrender, this resignation, it meant that at long last my body could start to kind of recharge itself. That's exactly what it did. I stopped beating myself up all the time with all this pointless questioning, all this pointless frightening myself. And in a remarkably short time, 6 to 8 weeks, I was almost back to normal. Now, I mean, I've said this before, but I mean, I did have ideal conditions in which to do this. There was no pressures or any kind. There was no stresses put upon me. But I'm just trying to show you how, if you get out of the way, so to speak, your body will recover, because that's what that's what it wants to do. And I think above all, that time taught me that I couldn't do anything about the state I was in, because there was no need for me to do anything about it. I racked my brains for weeks and months trying to understand and decide on what to do, and I was looking for something that didn't exist, because there wasn't anything I needed to do. Nothing at all. I simply had to let my body recover and repair itself, and that's exactly what it did. So that is how it worked for me, and that was it's something that has come back into my life at various times, and the sorts of depression I've had in more recent times have been more related to life situations, which I should talk about separately. But there have been times as well where the way I've been feeling, the anxiety and the symptoms that have come with it, I've got very depressed about. Most notable amongst those was panic, of course, until I figured out what to do about panic and did it. But there were other things like constant daily headaches and constantly upset stomach and digestive system. Things like that used to go on and on and on. It seemed indefinitely to me. And that certainly used to make me very depressed, because it seemed like I couldn't bring myself to do what I needed to do, which was to accept them. And as time has gone on, I've been able to do that more and more. I've talked extensively about this on my other videos, but the two, depression and anxiety in this context, are so interwoven, you can't really separate them out, because depression is almost, like I said, almost inevitable result of too much anxiety. And once you have something in mind, this is the other thing I should say, once you have a plan, you have a program, something you can follow, such as I've talked about, the Claire Weekes method. Once you have that, then the most frightening and depressing thoughts of all, the thought of, what if I'm like this for the rest of my life? What if I never recover? Those thoughts that keep coming, especially the more depressed you get, the more of those thoughts you get. finally, once you start to apply these techniques and use them yourself, that thought doesn't mean so much anymore, because you begin to see that it's wrong, that you really can recover. And that time I described, I was like that. I really, as in the weeks that led up to that final kind of showdown, if you like, this is how I was thinking. I was thinking, this is going to be my life from now on. This torture, this torment is all I'm going to get. And that, again, feeds the cycle, feeds the depression cycle, the depletion cycle. But it's wrong, because you can come out of it, and I did, and anyone else can, once they start to use the right tools to get them out of it. You see, you can, when you're at the very lowest state you can be in, when this type of depression, it feels it. Also, a nice expression I remember once, it's like somebody said, described it as like an ant looking up at Mount Everest. It just seems too much, far too much. It's just beyond your strength, beyond your capabilities. And I mean, that again is another feature of depression. It's just, you feel so useless, totally useless, both to yourself and to everyone around you. And when you've experienced it and you know how your mind kind of operates in that situation, you can really appreciate how people want to end their lives, and do end their lives, unfortunately. For myself, I never was brave enough to even think about killing myself. I often used to hope I wouldn't wake up during the worst stages of my anxiety. I used to even ask God if he would kill me sometimes, just to put me out of my misery, so to speak. But I never thought of, actually ending it myself, because I was too, I wasn't brave enough to even consider that. But yes, I mean, it can, this is why I said earlier about if somebody is really low, you must get them to seek help, because I think this is especially true, but not necessarily so, but especially true of men, because men will tend to keep it all inside. And they find it very hard to admit to feeling this way, of course. I mean, it's male pride, for want of a better term. I've done it myself. I've kept things inside and not wanted to display what I used to think of as being a kind of weakness. I mean, it's nothing of the kind. It's a physical condition. It's got nothing to do with weakness at all. It's just a physical condition. It's a very definite one. So there you are. I mean, however low you think you've sunk, and however indifferent you might feel, the reversal of this process is a gradual one. So don't expect too much too quickly. When I started to get better, and the way I started to do things again, I did it very gently. I started to gradually turn my attention back to the things I used to enjoy doing. And in the beginning, I could only do a little. And this is what I do now. If I ever get that depressed, I very gradually turn my attention back to doing things just a little at a time, as much as I can do. And it doesn't matter how little you do or whatever it is you're attempting, it's that attempt that is important, because, like I said, it gives your body a break from all this endless fear. So, as I say at the beginning, this is such a big subject, and it's such a difficult subject to talk about, because there's so much overlap, not just between anxiety and life situations. It's very hard to differentiate them completely, because there is always a combination of both to some degree. But I think to try and make it a bit more clear, I should talk about the other type of depression I've had separately. So please take heart, and please accept what I say to you, that you can come out of this. I've done it, and I've done it more than once, and there's nothing special about me to be able to do that. So, as I said, I was always saying about anxiety, it doesn't take a special type of person to do this. It's just understanding and then practicing, and not being hard on yourself if you don't kind of do things as quickly as you think you should. It's taking things at your own pace. And this is especially true, I think, of depletion, because it's a gradual rebuilding of your energy, and it can be surprisingly quick if your body gets the chance to recover. Anyway, if you've got any questions on this type of depletion, please ask me. I will, I'll try and help if I can, because I think I've had more than my fair share of depression over the years. So for now, I'll leave you with that, and like I say, ask me anything you want. I'll help if I possibly can, and I'll talk to you again on the next video about depression, the other type of depression. So for now, thank you for watching, and bye for now.